and welcome. Thank you all for coming to this afternoon's event, Beyond the Sky in Conversation with Judy Martin, with moderation by Sophie Edwards. My name is Ali Carlos, and I am the manager of collections and exhibitions here at the Art Gallery of Sudbury for approximately one more week. And I would like to begin by reading our land acknowledgement today. The Art Gallery of Sudbury, Galerie d'Art de Sudbury, respectfully acknowledges that we are located in Robinson-Huron Treaty 1850 territory, and the lands on which we gather are the traditional lands of the Atikameksheng and Anishinaabe, and within the traditional territory of the Sudbury Métis Regional Council. The large area we consider Greater Sudbury also exists within and adjacent to the territorial lands of the Wampanoag First Nation and the Sagamok and Anishinaabe. We honor, recognize, and respect these Indigenous peoples as the traditional stewards of our lands which we share today. The Art Gallery of Sudbury's ability to develop and present new exhibitions has also been greatly supported by significant annual funding contribution by the City of Greater Sudbury, and we would also like to recognize artistic funding from the Ontario Arts Council and the Canada Council for the Arts. I hope I didn't miss anybody. And now, on to the main event. First, I would like to introduce today's moderator, Sophie Edwards. Sophie Ann Edwards is an interdisciplinary environmental artist, geographer, and writer. She was the founding artistic/executive director of 4 Elements Living Arts from 2002 to 2018, during which time she curated and designed numerous projects, including the Ontario Lieutenant Governor Award-winning Connections Trail and Elemental Festival. She was longlisted for CBC's 2021 Poetry Prize, shortlisted for Art Poetry Magazine's 2019 Poem of the Year, and longlisted for Omnidon, okay. Omnidon Press's first and second book award for A Mouth of Vowels, which is forthcoming with 1366, an imprint of Guernica editions. Conversations with the Kagawon River, Talon Books 2024. It was a most anticipated read by both CBC Books and Choir and Choir. Governor General Award-winning poet Don McKay described the book as subversive, risk-taking, and restlessly aversive. And now for the lady of the hour, Judy Martin. Canadian artist Judy Martin combines traditional hand-stitched, local natural dyes and used domestic textiles to connect us poetically with our own interior worlds. The artist grew up on a large rural property in northwestern Ontario and believes that the solitude of long summers is how she discovered her inner dream world that is her subject. She holds 2 honors BA degrees in fine art, one from Canada, Lakehead University 1993 Chancellor's Medal, and one from United Kingdom, Middlesex University, Embroidered Textiles 2012 First Class Honors. Judy is a longtime member of Craft Ontario, and in 2018 she won the award for Mid-Career Excellence. Judy's work has been shown in solo and group exhibitions across Canada and internationally. Her large format textiles are included in several Ontario public art collections, including Sudbury, Thunder Bay, and Cambridge, as well as the International Quilt Museum in the US and the Canada Council Art Bank. Judy and her lovely husband Ned live and work on Manitoulin Island in the Great Lake Huron. And once again, thank you all for coming, and take it away, Sophie and Judy. Might be a little bit of reverb, but
okay.
If we find it too annoying, we can.
We don't really need them, or do we need them for the recording?
No, if you want to project, that also works.
I think I just want to check with people in the back row. We do need some sound amplification, which is why we have the sound bar.
So can you hear us if we're speaking at this level? Everybody back there?
Yeah.
Raise your hands if you don't, but I think with this reverb, it's going to be tricky. So we'll just be conscientious about speaking loudly, and if you can't hear, please raise your hands. So thank you so much for coming. I'm really been excited about sitting and talking with Judy, and it was an honor to be asked to come. So I thank you, Sudbury, for this opportunity. I adored Judy personally and loved her work for a very long time. She's influenced many of us and been a friend and a mentor, including to me. So it's really great to be here. Judy and I have had many conversations over the years, but in preparation for this conversation, we met twice and spent a goodly amount of time talking. And I think we could probably talk for about 4 hours. And I do have a bunch of questions. I doubt we'll get to all of them. So this will sort of be a taste of the really rich conversation. I mean, Judy's been doing her work for so long and very thoughtfully and carefully doing her work. So I think, an hour is not going to do justice. So this will be a little dip into her work and our thinking. And I'm particularly interested because we're moving between, and some of the things I want to get into with Judy today are around her process, her thinking around care, and the dimensionality of her work and how that crosses through into poetics. So quilts and her work as a dimensional or looking at space, and because they're off the wall and they move and you can touch them and move around. And as a poet who works interdisciplinarily, and I work off the page in my poetics, I'm interested in the crossover. So it's very interesting for me. So let's get into this. And again, let me know if you can't hear either of us. I think I want to start with one of the first questions is about your journaling practice. I don't know if all of you know, but Judy has a very dedicated journal practice, so she keeps these.
I brought one here, yeah. Brought two.
So Judy works using these journals, dedicated practice most days, and works from them. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about them as a material, the materiality of the journals, because they're art objects themselves. So I'm interested in that because as a process that you use in your work, but also how these work in between your quilts and these as text, because you have text that moves into your quilts and back and forth, and you have images in here, and you have quotes and things that move back and forth. So I'd like you to speak a little bit about how you understand your journal practice and how it works between the objects that you create inside of them and how they work together.
How they work with my quilts?
Yeah.
Well, I'd almost say they were almost more important to my practice than the textiles, because I don't go a day without my journal. I open it up to the day. I put the date. This is April 11th. I put the date at the front of the book. April 6th, 2024 to April 15th, 2004. That's 2 weeks to this whole book, right? And so there's a lot of handwriting in it. On April 11th, I wrote, "This revelation upon waking, neither of the commercial galleries that I speak about in my resume appreciate my work. They do not support me." So I won't go on. I was kind of a revelation. 2021. Yeah, they don't support me. Not enough. They don't adore me. Anyway, so at the first beginning of the book is usually reserved for inspiration and biography. Like this is Mary Cassette's famous letter, and this is a quilt I made. And some of the text is from, when I do talks like this, I type madly, I'm a very fast typer, and I might put in some of the text that I was just preparing myself. Like this says, "The sublime and the divine are manifested in the natural world," bracket, Hegel. So it's just I didn't read the whole book of Hegel. I just found that quote and I wanted to have that quote. And because I write about the sublime, I had to think about the sublime when I did the university class, and one of my examiners asked me if I was attempting to work with the sublime. And I realized I didn't know what it meant. And so I read a bunch of essays about it. Anyway, those are the front of it. I'm probably, and there's a piece of mine that I did, and there's a piece of mine, and this is a sketch that I photographed. That's my little April, opening her birthday present. This is about the circle, the indigenous idea of what the circle means. So I clipped this from another journal and pasted it in this one because it's so important to me to remember these things. And I also, and there's me as a child with my brother and sister. So old photos, the list of the books I read in 2 weeks. Usually they take 3 weeks. Anyway, that's the front, and now I start April 6th. So what did I do on April 6th? The first time in a week that it's been a sun-filled morning. Today, a new journal. On days when I start new journals, I'm put into a state of reflection on my whole project of record-keeping, researching, reading, taking notes, thinking with my writing drawing hand. Anyway, the reason it's so important is because I really Here's some sketches, because they're called sketchbooks, right? And so I do have sketches, but all my sketches are in ballpoint pen. And I was thinking about this new sculpture that I made for September 2024. It's going to look like castles. So I just started, but you can see they're not really, they're just sketches, they're just ideas. And how I'm going to hang the show, or the show in Nova Scotia, how I was going to install my work. I made a sketch about that. But I just wanted to say one more thing, and then you can ask me another question if you want.
Say anything you want.
Is that I reread my older journals, and especially I reread the one that just came before, because the new idea is in there, and you can see it's only 2 weeks old. It's not as if it's an ancient idea. It's something fairly recent. So when I start my new journal, I will, over my breakfast usually, read a little bit of this one, bookmark in. And if there's something that I still need to keep in my new journal, I will put it in again. Like I just don't let myself forget these good ideas, and don't let myself forget this good quote. So that's how they're so nourishing for me. Yeah.
And you said earlier you actually will cut pages and move them forward, or?
Yeah.
See, another question, this brings me to, because you do this with your work, we talked about that just a minute ago, how you have this fearlessness around your work. You work, you listen to the work, you have an idea, but you follow the materiality, what the material wants, and then what the project wants, and you will cut into it, you will rip them apart and start over again. I don't know if that's a question, but it's just an observation, and you seem to do the same thing with your...
Well, with the journal, Sophie, it's because I'm actually getting rid of my journals. I've got 200 journals, and I'm running out of shelf space. And so I know they're my archives, and everybody's going to want to read them when I die. But that's a lot. And so I go through every day, I try to go every day 45 minutes, and I transcribe a journal into my laptop. And that's when I cut out that paper. If it's still a good paper, I put it in. So I'm doing a chronological journal in the laptop. I'm very, very fast at typing, and it's a way of reading.
Right.
So there's 2 times I reread, one over my breakfast and one over the 45 minutes with a different old journal. And that's probably enough about the journals, but I do use them a lot in my work. I don't know.
Yeah, well, maybe we can, there's so many questions and they all one leads to another, but maybe we could just talk a bit more about the text, because you do move between, you use them as like you're saying, a reference and an inspiration and a way to think through, but this moves into your journal, not just in terms of design, not into your quilts, but not just you're not just thinking it through there. Sometimes the text is moving, and I'm curious if you could talk a bit about how the quotes and poetics and language, so the relationship between text and textiles and how they move between, and sometimes they're hidden, sometimes they're fully there. I noticed even in your notebook in the show, you've got quotes and things, reflections, and then it looks like at the end, and you invite people to leave their messages, but then when you go forward, there's more notes from you further on, sort of hidden, and you kind of have this half-shown, half-hidden, almost an archive of text that shows up in your work. So I was wondering if you could talk about your relationship to the written word with your quilting practice.
Yeah. Well, I like to read poems, and I don't always put a whole poem into the journal, but sometimes just a couple words, and I always put who wrote it. And sometimes those are my titles in my work. But using the actual journal text has occurred in a couple of my pieces. The velvet journal, when it's coming up here, there's one at the end and there's one. Anyway, I would take the old journal papers and put cloth on them and then piece them together so the inside of the journal, oh here, this one. So this is the back. So this is journal text, and that's a ladies' magazine paper. And the other side is covered with fabric. This is, I'm showing you this paper side because Sophie was wondering about the text. The other side doesn't have any paper. It looks like velvet hearts. It looks like, and here's some more text. This is a poem by a surrealist poet, Kay Sage. And I embroidered that one. And there's another velvet. This is the new one going on right now. It's white fabric sewn together with red thread, and it's going to flip to the other side too, unless we've paused it there. That is text from my 89 and 90 journals when I was only in my 30s. I've gone through them. They're in that laptop, so now I'm cutting them up. There's text in the bottom of this one as well. And if it's in the journal, I suppose I don't know. That's the way I save this text that I love, and I develop the text. I'll start with something that maybe Hegel said, and I'll turn it into something that I've said just because it's come up so many times. And my titles, for example, come from poetry. That piece came from poetry. We don't know how to pause it. Yeah, it's okay. Anyway, not this one. Yeah. These are the bundles. I actually did write a bunch of notes about the poetics in my work, but I wasn't going to use my notes because I wanted to just talk. And, so I may forget some things. We'll see. I'm fine.
Let's move to your journal. I'm really interested in your process. You have a very long, careful, slow process, not just for each individual work, but also your entire career. You're very much about the process, a slow process, very, very conscientious about the materials and the materiality of the work. You dye, you hand dye, work's all hand stitched. So, and in many ways for me, that's a sort of a response or reaction or a resistance to sort of this idea of sort of the fast way that they're supposed to work in contemporary art or in life itself. It's kind of a counter kind of capitalist logics of productivity and as a sort of feminine and art feminist practice. You're kind of resisting or presenting a different kind of way of doing work. Because it's large pieces, large slow process. So I was wondering, I think people might be interested if you talked a little more about why you do the way you do.
Why I work the way I work so slowly.
So slowly and in this way, and why that's important to you.
Yeah, I think I really love having these friends for years. They take me years to make each piece. And, but I don't go just start one and then work for 2 years on one piece. I work on maybe 8 or 10 pieces at the same time, put them aside. But because they're with me and we're with the active life that is going on in the world and with my family and with my own aging or whatever, with the books I've read, those pieces actually change as I go through my life to reflect more about what I'm thinking. And so I'll put them away, I'll fold them up, put them away, because I want to move on to another one. I get excited about another one, and I work on the other one. But then I come back to this one and I say, and I'll do something different that I didn't know I was going to do. And I really like being able to keep on changing. Like, I'll tell you about the quilt that I was making. It was rusty dyed fabrics. It was all triangles, quite traditional. And my father had died a couple of years earlier, maybe just a year earlier, and I came across in my fabrics his blue hospital gown. And I said, I think I need to put this sort of sky blue triangle in this rusty brown quilts. So I cut some of the hospital gown up and put them in kind of as up in the sky area. Stood back and I really liked it. But then, the fact that it was the hospital gown, it was my father's, it changed the whole thing for me. And I think that is what makes it poetic. And almost all my work responds to the material that way. So I began thinking about the piece as a biographical piece about my dad and how he lived in an empty farm and how he had to leave that farm and how it was kind of sad. And so it became kind of, I made a big circle that was not filled in, that was empty on the quilt. And then I realized I was feeling kind of empty because I missed him. And so for me, that quilt means so much. But whether anybody else gets it, I think they do. Because I stitch so much. I think my hand stitching is like touching you, you know? I think, I don't know. Anyway, that's how I work. And I allow my work to change. And
Yeah, there's a great deal of trust in the material in your hands. And we talked about this the other day about how important that is now for us, because people, this is so much about consume. We consume when we don't know how to make, and we're not really in touch with materials, the materials of life. And you're very close to that. And I think that comes across in the work, closeness to the work. Maybe about that closeness, we could talk about your bundles and this sense of, because you talked, I think, what was the quote you said over there? It's practice of care. I can't remember how you phrased it in your notebook over there. But do you want to talk about the quilts and this process of care and quilts of care and then your bundles? Because you've been doing a lot of bundling in the last number of years, and I don't know, have you seen her any of the bundles?
could you stop on that? When it comes to the bundle about, that's
Before or after?
it's after. I started bundling when my mom died. I'm talking about my parents here, but we all have parents, so you'll understand what I mean. And it's the one that looks like it's on the ground. Keep going. So the next one. It's actually the last one. Keep going. Since we're there. Okay, so this was the first bundle I did, and I took my mother's clothes. And because she was cremated, and I just wanted to have something tangible, I guess. So now I went too far. Yeah. So I took her clothes and I wrapped them up in a sheet, and then I closed that up to be just a solid thing. I didn't bring all these pictures because we only wanted to have 30 pictures. And kept wrapping it many times with fabrics I had on hand and bundled it up with all these layers of wrapping. One of them being lead fishing weights because I had read Anselm Kiefer and his use of lead as alchemy and how it turns into gold. And so I thought, well, if you're putting lead with your mom and she's going to go to the spirit world, then she's going to turn into kind of gold, I don't know. Anyway, so that was my very first one, and I actually have never shown it to anybody. So it's a premiere for seeing it. I haven't talked about it before. And so it's in our yard. I buried it under some leaves, and I check on it every now and then. I check on her, but I was going to use the fabrics to make something with, but I still haven't. So then the next bundles are the ones that come after. Once I figured out how I felt so good by doing this bundling gesture that I really went into the wrapping part, and these are just quilt bats inside these two bundles. These are called wrapped forms. They're made in 2008, and I kind of got into this like a mummy, Egyptian mummy. So, but then it really still made me feel, it really healed me, and I felt, I didn't know what I was doing, because you must see that Ned would say, "Are you making your voodoos again?" We didn't really know what I was doing, but I kept doing it. And then after that, I've been making bundles, lots and lots of bundles. And I bundle up the branches, and I bundle up the leaves in my garden, and I bundle up old projects, and so I've been doing a lot. And I think it is because of this, the way it makes me feel, But also, when you put a Band-Aid on the child's finger, you know, you're wrapping them and they feel better. So we all feel better if we just would wrap more. So, and I think my quilts are also, obviously they're for wrapping you up in and taking care of you. And so yeah, I make them and I put them in exhibitions. I don't just hold them back because I want to send them out to the world. I feel urgency about doing this. I just want to keep making my quilts and sharing them. And I've also been making a lot more gifts lately. And like actual human beings are getting these caring things too, rather than just the art world, such as it is.
Yeah, well, maybe you can say a little bit more about that urgency and, when we're talking about, you know, I think as artists, we're all, just the way the world is right now, we think is making art kind of just a selfish thing, you know, what should we be doing? Because there's so much going on. And I'm often asking myself, is this, you know, what's the point of doing what I'm doing? Is it just a selfish thing? Like some of what you've written in your notebook there, and this urgency you're talking about, and I think somehow it links to this.
Well, I'd like to talk about, because whenever I get that feeling, and of course I do, I think all creatives feel, I shouldn't be doing this, I should be with Doctors Without Borders, I should volunteer, I should give all my money. I have to do something. The world needs more concrete things. But then I turn to other artists and I listen to their words. Like Patti Smith said, even amongst all the stupidity and all the terror, I need to live and I need to do my work. And I admire her. And you know, she makes a big difference in the world because she also protests, but she also does her work. And Toni Morrison, if we didn't make it, this is the time to make artwork because this is how civilizations stay. We have to make art. It's our culture that keeps our civilization, our people, and our humanity going. And then I'll talk about Henri Matisse because he's pretty famous for something he said in 1908, which was that he wanted to make his art give people serenity and peace and be like an armchair so that they could get away from that awful world. And that was in 1908 he wrote that. And I was pretty annoyed with him when I read that because I thought he was copying out. Because I thought, you are such a big deal. You should make work that makes people change their minds, not just be in the armchair. But now I get it completely. And one more little thing about him, because I didn't remember, I read about him, and I knew that his daughter was in the resistance during the Nazi occupation of Paris and France. And she got pretty annoyed at him. She said, Dad, you have to do more. Do more work about, but he was also very old and very sick. He almost died during that war. But he didn't stop making his artwork. He couldn't paint anymore because he was so sick, so he started doing those cutouts. And he made the cutouts during the war. And he made a publication of them called Jazz. And all those pieces in the Jazz series are full of life and full of bright colors. And they bring people this kind of happiness and memories of their past life. And so that was his way of being in the war. So we have to remember these icons of art and culture and how important they are. And we just have to believe that what we are doing is important. And I think that my quilts are not going to save the world. My quilts are not going to make a president not be elected or whatever. They're not going to. But they're not going to hurt either. They're going